Hello, Out Entrepreneurs. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 9 of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. Today, I am thrilled to be interviewing a fellow Portland Out boss, Matthew Epplesheimer. Matthew, are you ready to inspire fellow Out bosses?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Matthew is a team leader, a technical strategist, and a developer. He is the managing director of Rocket Lift, a company providing custom web development and digital marketing services to purpose-driven organizations. He is also a fellow podcaster, hosting a program entitled Hard Refresh, which tells the behind-the-scenes stories of when things break on the internet, and more importantly, his show shares some of the secrets of how to fix our internet woes. Matthew, thanks again for being on the show. I was hoping that you could tell us just a little bit more about what your business does and what makes it unique.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Rhodes. This is a real exciting honor. It's also a little bit scary, I'll share. To be honest, this is kind of my coming out as a business owner. I'm out to friends and family, but it's not something I've ever really spoken about publicly in a business context. So Rocket Lift is a almost 7-year-old company. We're a partner to purpose-driven and values-driven organizations, and we provide digital marketing and custom web software services. You can see our values at rocketlift.com/values, which are very important to us. And many web agencies just focus on building a website itself and are very project-based and sort of get a project done and then move on to the next one. At Rocket Lift, we focus on long-term partnerships with clients that need ongoing support and evolving their marketing and their business. We focus on return on investment and giving you custom capabilities in your website's content management system or your digital marketing services that serve your specific needs. So we think and act like business consultants first, and we think we're a good fit for companies that look for technical partners who take initiative and ownership to help support you and add a lot of their own perspective and expertise to help you succeed.
I really appreciate that you're prioritizing working with purpose-driven organizations, businesses, and also that you have been really thoughtful about thinking about the values that shape your business. I think that's unique. And also you're providing, on top of serving, purpose-driven organizations, you're providing a ton of value through Hard Refresh. I can't tell you how many times I'm going to Google trying to manage my own website. So it's definitely a show it's super helpful. I can't recommend that enough. It's clear you're doing a lot of really amazing things, but what's one thing right now that has you most inspired about your business?
Well, probably the thing that I'm most excited about right now is that we're working on this new series called Rules for Websites, which is going to be a series of blog posts, and we're probably going to spin it off into a mini podcast, which is just a series of very short episodes, one for each rule that we come up with. And the idea is to basically just share, here are do's and don'ts when you are working on a website. And the reason I'm excited about it is because it's something that is going to be really easy for me to produce, and I think is going to add a lot of value. I'm at a point in my professional life as a 33-year-old who's been working in the web industry for 10 years now, off and on with a few gaps, but I've got enough experience where I'm starting to really realize that I do know some things, things that may seem simple or obvious to me, but that aren't to most people. And so sort of figuring out that we can share that and hopefully, raise our profile a little bit by adding value for folks. So that's something that I'm hoping to have live by the time this podcast episode airs. So if people are interested, you can check that out at rocketlift.com/rules for websites. So that's what's got me most excited today.
I want to shift and focus in on your own personal journey. For many of the Out entrepreneurs that I know, it seems like they arrived at starting their own businesses for one of two reasons. They either felt a calling to pursue a purpose-driven idea, or they just couldn't stomach the idea of fitting into a workplace culture that didn't truly value who they are. So Matthew, I'm just curious which one of these scenarios resonates the most with you. I mean, you had mentioned that you started your business 7 years ago. So if you could step back in time, what was the primary driver for you starting your business? And you focus on values, so how does the value of bringing your authentic self to work show up, and also for your team?
If I had to choose one, I would say I'm most drawn to pursuing purpose-driven work. And Rocket Lift was actually started when I was interested years ago in building some kind of a food-related startup. I have a real passion for eating healthy and how food connects us to community and to place and to our environment, and how it's such a source of nourishment, of course, physically, but also sort of spiritually and communally. And so I've got this like long time passion for food-related issues, and I started Rocket Lift because I wanted to create some kind of a food-related web startup, and I wanted to gain experience through working with our client and building their businesses that would then apply to some sort of food-related startup. So 7 years later, I haven't really been able to focus on that yet. It's been kind of a long journey with ups and downs. Running a web development agency can be harrowing at times, and it's a real roller coaster of feast and famine. And so where we are today, we've built this business up to the point we're at now, but haven't really been able to focus on those kinds of ideas yet. So it's still something I'm hoping to work on. But through Rocket Lift, I get to focus on building culture and creating a work environment that is fulfilling and recognizes people's humanity. And I mean, small things from sick days are no problem, and we don't really have a paid time off policy. It's just work the time you need and take the time you need off and just get the work done. And we're a remote distributed company. Everybody works from home and has lots of flexibility. I'm almost a pushover when it comes to things like if somebody needs to take some time during the day, I don't really care. That's what I want for myself, and I'm happy to create an environment where other people can work in that environment as well. I think that's been how I've been able to kind of express that interest in having purpose-driven work is just being able to have a company culture where we we're human beings first, and work is fulfilling in as much as it's expresses ourselves and our creativity. We're sort of an anti-corporate culture at Rocket Lift in a way.
So when you started out on your venture to be your own boss, did being LGBTQ influence your journey when you first started 7 years ago to become your own boss?
It really didn't. And I've been working for myself since graduating from college in 2005. And I really only came to realize I was bisexual in the last 2-3 years. And I was only out to friends and family as of last year, in the summer of 2016. So I can't say that it really had anything to do with becoming my own boss.
And it sounds like you're on the path of bringing your whole self to work now, and I think that there's a number of listeners that can really identify with your particular narrative of negotiating. I've been my own boss for a long time, and now I'm recognizing that I'm a part of the LGBT community, and how do I navigate this? And so I'm just wondering, even though this is still fresh for you, looking back over 2 to 3 years, was there a time where it might have been difficult for you to be out in the workplace? I think that this type of story or example can really help some people negotiate bringing their whole selves to work and also managing the fear of job security or losing business.
In general, though, as far as the business goes, I think it's been confusing for me to know to what extent should I be public about this. Because on the one hand, it is who I am. And on the other hand, that shouldn't be a big deal. It's not something that I think should have any bearing on whether somebody hires Rocket Lift or chooses to work with Rocket Lift. But on the other hand, there's some people who, if they were going to have a problem with that, I'd love for them to screen themselves out and not have to work with them, not have to have that conversation. But on the other hand, I know that a lot of people, I think wrongly, but just the same, find that people talking about their sexual orientation in a professional context are really out of line or attention seeking. So it's trying to figure out, because I have to be a marketer, that's sort of my number one job is projecting our image and how I represent the company. And so it's something I continue to struggle with. And I'm actually looking forward to learning from this show, your show, Rhodes, about how other people have sort of handled that. For me, what it sort of means to be out as an entrepreneur is it means courage, which is something I draw on in other areas, because I do think that saying this is who I am, you may or may not like it, but I'm going to be who I am anyway, it does take some bravery. And bravery and courage is, something you do instead of fear, or in spite of fear, rather, not because you are fearless, but something that you might be afraid, but you're going to do it anyway. And so that's a good skill or sort of a good character trait in business, because business is hard and takes a lot of faith and courage in all kinds of areas. Making payroll can be an adventure on a monthly basis, depending on your business model. So, being out shows that I have that courage, kind of proves it to myself. And I think it also kind of builds a good practice of courage that I can apply to other areas. And for the right kind of customer, for Rocket Lift and our partners, I think it shows that I have integrity, and that's something that's going to, hopefully people see that and can take that message from it.
I really liked what you said about the power of choosing. You had mentioned to bring your whole self to work, that potentially could limit who you would be working with, but you could be weeding out potential clients that may not align with your values. And so I think that that's something for all of us as entrepreneurs to consider, is that we do have the power of choosing who we work with to a certain extent. We do have to cover our costs and build a thriving practice, and we do have that power of choosing. And so I think that that's really valuable for our listeners. And also, I really liked what you were saying about courage and being who we are and being authentic. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to our sexual orientation or our gender identity. There's many aspects of who we are that sometimes we feel like we have to cover in the workplace. And I think that that's something that, even if you're not LGBT, that's something that is probably universal as a human condition. Of none of us can conform to a cookie cutter image of being a person. That's what makes us beautiful, and that gives diversity and strength to our human experience. And yet there is that pressure, in different industries of trying to cover those things that truly make us who we are. So I thank you for sharing that. And being out in the workplace is something that you're negotiating still. So as you are negotiating this, I'm wondering if you could share a moment where you've successfully leveraged being out in your business, and if there was a way that has benefited your business. I could say one thing is, we had met at a podcast unconference in November, and I was sharing more about my podcast, which is relatively new, and that I wanted to feature the stories of out bosses. And I was so excited that you fit the demographic of the show. So I think that that's one way of at least getting Rocket Lift out to the community. But I was wondering if there's maybe another example that you might want to share for listeners around the positive aspects of building community and building a thriving business while being out.
That was actually what I was going to say.
Okay.
This question was meeting you, and that was a really tender moment. I was feeling really terrified. Is not an exaggeration, with Trump's election, and you seemed very just comfortable in your own skin and very forthcoming with your identity, and that was like a bit of a life preserver for me in that particular moment, which was an emotional day. Other ways in which it's been a factor for me at work. One of our values at Rocket Lift, we spend a lot of time trying to articulate what those values are, and one that we haven't gotten explicit about, but it's kind of implicit in a number of them, is diversity. And it's not something that we've made explicit because it's difficult to talk about diversity in a way that, in a sort of a soundbite way and effectively, because it's a complicated issue. But it's something that I talk about when hiring and when interviewing and recruiting people. Is, this is a diverse workplace. We have people of various ethnicities and sexual orientation. And I've had people in interviews tell me, in job interviews, that, wow, nobody's ever brought this up in a first interview. And for me, it's important to do that as early as possible, because I want people to be comfortable with diversity. And I want people to be able to articulate that diversity isn't just something we pay lip service to. It is important for so many reasons, including that it makes us more creative as a team and more effective as a team. The more lived experience we can bring to the table from our various different perspectives, then the greater our solutions are going to be. And the more we're going to be able to serve good design and good content that speaks to people, no matter who they are. And really sort of designing for as many people as possible means being open to ways in which people are different. And so that's a way in which I've sort of employed it, if you will, at work. I've never actually said in an interview. So by the way, I'm bi, but I have said to people, this is a diverse workplace where we have LGBT community members, we have people of different races, and I ask people, how do you feel about that? Is this something you're comfortable talking about and being open about? Because being in a diverse workplace is not just something that you achieve and then you're done. It's an experience, and it's something that's ongoing and requires commitment to on an ongoing basis from everybody.
Having that perspective of being LGBT, if you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're someone who's differently abled, and you're in a leadership position, having that perspective when you're thinking about building a diverse team, whether it's thinking about people diversity or cognitive diversity, differences in ideas, that gives you the competitive advantage over other web design companies, especially given that you're so purpose-driven. So you're definitely leveraging your perspective to build a more innovative and successful business. So I want to congratulate you on that and being so proactive in thinking about your own culture within your firm. So one more question before we go to a quick sponsorship break. If there's one thing that you would want our listeners to really focus in on and make sure that they can take away to just inspire them to bring their whole selves to work, what would that be?
For me, I wish somebody had told me that being out, it has a lot of benefits. And I've been taught to expect that life was going to get easier in some ways and that I was going to be more fulfilled and it is that. It's all of those things. It's wonderful being out. And one of the ways in which it's wonderful is that I have entire new ways or parts of myself that I need to explore and learn about. Like my identity, like shifting your identity is just, it's such a profound phrase to say. Like for me, it wasn't just being who I am. It was like realizing that who I am is different than I thought. And so that's a real journey to go on. And that's been great. But what I wish somebody had told me is that it's not easy. It's not always all roses. And so for me, like having, and I'm not talking about, like I haven't really experienced any homophobia directed at me in a direct way. And thankfully, I haven't experienced any bigotry directed at me, but I have experienced a lot of, surprisingly, maybe this is unique to bisexual or pansexuals if you like, but there's a lot of closeted bi people who came out of the woodwork when I came out and tried to stop me, which surprised me. And that's a whole separate issue that, we probably can't unpack here. But I think the takeaway is for people is that, if it's hard, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That's probably something that you should expect, is that being your true self challenges other people who aren't being their true self. And maybe that's harsh, but that is the way I feel about it. Some of the reactions that I've gotten from other people who my being my true self really challenged them, and they pushed back in a knee-jerk way that really caught me off guard and really surprised me.
Going back to what you were saying around bravery and being comfortable in your skin is holding that place for other people who might not be ready to be out, and just normalizing that, being LGBT is a part of the human experience, and that you can be your whole self as you do really great work that's purpose-driven and rooted in your values. And I think that that's something really that can really help listeners that are maybe a few years behind where you're at and just thinking about, is this even a possibility? And there's so much stress and worry that comes with covering different aspects of yourself, and that impacts your productivity and your effectiveness on the job. So I think just being an example for other folks, especially leading such a successful company as Rocket Lift, it's very important for people to see a visible business owner out and just being themselves. So on that note, we're going to take a quick sponsorship break, but please don't go anywhere, because when we return, we're going to go through the bonus round and learn a little bit more about Matthew.
HR and diversity professionals. Are you struggling with engaging LGBTQ talent? Do you stay awake at night worrying about limiting litigation risks? Have you considered seeking support around these concerns, but just aren't sure where to turn? Look no further. Rhodes Perry Consulting offers you solutions with the Engaging LGBTQ Talent A to Z certification. This proven 4-week mentorship program delivers skills, offers support, and connects you with other professionals committed to transforming themselves and their workplaces. Learn more about this cutting-edge program by visiting rhodesperry.com and use the promo code RPC for a 10% discount. Take action and visit rhodesperry.com.
Welcome back, Outbosses. We are now going into our bonus round, where we will have the chance to get to know Matthew just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then we're going to learn one way that we can stay in touch with Matthew after the interview is done. So, Matthew, are you ready for the bonus round?
Bring it on.
Yes. All right. In one sentence, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
It's about being courageous in bringing who you are, and that's like, what are you thinking about? How are you feeling? What are you afraid of? Or what are you excited about? Bring that, because that's actually, it takes courage, but that is like that's the sauce that your coworkers are going to really benefit from. That's your unique contributions, are all of those things you're feeling, and you can't know. And I guarantee you, if you live that way, there will be myriad benefits that come from that you can't possibly predict, that other people will be inspired by in ways that you never could have imagined. How's that?
That's great. That's perfect. What's one personal habit that helps you master yourself in your business?
I use technology to remember everything. So I never have to, I don't forget things. I remember all months from now, somebody, asks for a follow-up, like say in a sales context, somebody thinks that they're going to be ready in June. They'll have forgotten about me by June, but I will too. I'll have forgotten about them by June, but I'll get a reminder thanks to one of many pieces of software I use saying, call this person. They said they wanted to call in June. And then they're going to be really appreciative when just in time I'm there when they have this problem that's back in top of mind for them. So there's a number of apps that I use for that. And
led by a true technical strategist.
Yes, it brings so much peace of mind and more effectiveness. Most of the time when you're, again, talking more about sales, most of the time when you're selling to people need to have a need for your services, have the ability to buy, and the time needs to be right. And most of the time people will satisfy those first two criteria. Yeah. And the third criteria is when you get lucky and you need to strike when the iron's hot. And so coming back to them and reaching out to them again later is something that, I wouldn't possibly do except through reminders.
Name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
Everything that has to do with administration, taxes, and compliance. I don't ever think about it, and my dear fiance does, and she's a saint because she takes all of that stress and pressure away from me, and so I can do other things.
Nice. And can you share a book or a podcast that has contributed to your success as an outboss?
Yeah, so this is maybe an easy one, but if you're not listening to the Savage Lovecast, I highly recommend it, at least being familiar with it. It has really been my sexual education as an adult and super valuable, just way to understand people. So as a boss, being able to work with people and being compassionate and meeting people where they are and who they are. Dan Savage isn't for everybody, but he does love people in a particular way. He has a particular compassion for people that is really instructive. And plus, along the way, you're going to learn a lot of great things about love and sex and other things. So it's that's my recommendation.
And that will be included in the show notes. Please share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take the entrepreneurial leap.
Being out is better in every way. Like I said earlier, it's not necessarily easy at all times, but it will make you a better person. And that includes living your entrepreneurial dreams. It gets easier when you're being who you really are and when you're honest about that with everybody around you. So that's not new. I had to hear that hundreds of times, and I'll be one more voice telling somebody who's not out yet but listening to this podcast that it will. Yeah. And I almost want to cry thinking about like life before and after and how much different I feel as a person, being who I really am and being comfortable talking about it. So you can feel that too.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to thank you for spending so much time and being on the show and helping folks recognize that coming out and being your true self when you're ready and when you feel safe is a really liberating process. And it's also hard. And just figuring out how to navigate that, I hope more people will tune into the show and hear from other folks on what their journeys have been like. And maybe you'll recognize some similar places where you've been and some differences in that process. And that's the beauty of the show. So Matthew, thank you again for your time and sharing more about your story and for inspiring fellow outbosses. Before we go, can you please share one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn more about any special business promotions that you might be offering for our listeners?
Sure. Visit rocketlift.com, and I'm putting up a special link with a special offer for your audience, Rhodes. That's rocketlift.com/Rhodes.
Excellent. All right. I always love surprises. I hope my listeners do too. So outbosses, thank you for tuning into this week's episode. Please be sure to check out the show notes for highlights from today's conversation, the special surprise promotion that you're eligible for, and also please consider leaving a review in iTunes if you found the show helpful. For now, please keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.